afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. So I was emailed by Karen. We haven't previously been involved in this project, and I don't quite how to follow the last presentation because our digital records are not at that standard at all. But we had a very exciting project which I was asked to speak about. We've chosen to speak about understanding your content. First, a little about the archive. It's created from a family called the Kramers, who were involved with the Fabians and various other labour and socialist campaigns through the 20th century. We've since had significant donations, for example, from the Communication Workers Union and Albert Knight, who founded the Labour College, which I hadn't heard of until we got this donation, but he's got his photo albums from the 20s after the Russian Revolution and so on. So they're very significant donations as well as the original collection. So understanding our papers and our audio-visual content, let alone the digital, is a major task. We're only 3 years old as an archive. We're volunteer run. I'm a history teacher, I'm not an archivist, and we've had to learn from as we go along and with guidance from the National Archives, using the Discovery Manage Your Collection National Archives programme for cataloguing. So the pictures show our emphasis on public engagement and community involvement in heritage. The next picture shows our location, which is in central Birmingham. We moved from a upstairs room in a house to Birmingham Midland Institute, where we have 2 rooms, and so that was provided us with workroom and room to expand, and that only happened 2 years ago. The oral history project, which I was asked to speak about specifically, started with a Historic England grant, very exciting. One of the first applications we made, it was called Everyday Heritage. Duncan Wilson, the Chief Executive of Historic England, emphasised that much was known about palaces and historic houses, but not much about ordinary people's places of life and where they lived and their work, which was it's the majority of people in this country, and certainly in Birmingham through the 19th, 20th century. There are also other criteria where the risk of reaching out to people at risk of loneliness and isolation. This was just after COVID that we received the grant, and engaging those people, telling their unknown stories, untold stories. Wanted to reach out to a wider audience than the typical archive visitor. And we also felt that Birmingham heritage, particularly at the time of the Industrial Revolution, was being lost through much rebuilding and deindustrialisation. If you visit Birmingham, it's a constant building site and constant change. So we do feel that a digital assets register would help us with accessibility and use of digital records, but at the moment we're sort of hanging by our fingertips and working on cataloguing and engagement and various strands. So this was the project, and there were 57 grants awarded, and we have 5 university students and 20 retired workers. And their interviews were used in schoolwork and also in community activities. So the first stage was the interviews, which I'll speak about, and that's not the only part. That's not the only digital information that was collected. So the students were trained by the Oral History Society, small group with volunteers and other people there too. So that created more digital content. Here's some pictures of the training before the interviews. We used a Zoom recorder or we filmed the interviews. So digital content's already being collected before the actual interviews. Interviewers like Charles in the bottom there gave us significant donations. He produced, him and his wife were involved in various left-wing groups through the 20th century. He also produced a handwritten autobiography by somebody in his family, which started in about 1900. His family lived in Aston, so we're trying to transcribe that and digitise it. So there's lots of things were produced from the initial interviews. So some interviews were on our website, selected interviews, but editing and transcription are major lengthy processes. And that's we're working on that too. On the right are some headings which I realise you won't be able to read. but those are suggested by the Oral History Society for keeping a record of interviews, which is like a digital assets register for interviews. And some of those headings, I won't read them all, but accession, interviewee, recording date, track, wavelength, file length, MP3s created, backed up to hard drive and so on. So that's a record that I realised from doing this talk today that we should collect, and that will probably be quite easy to produce. On the bottom is the toolkit information for slide 4. So topic 4, understand your content. It's a great idea, but as we're not a funded institution, many demands on the core volunteers. And we have a website, we use LinkedIn, we've created some newsletters, but there's potentially much more digital work. On the right is this record that we're hoping to produce fairly soon. So for most interviews, we just have summaries which are produced by students, and that's the advice of the Oral History Society, because transcripts, which are very useful to find information, take much longer. And some of these are brief. So this is just a little selection from one transcript, and it could be even briefer. It could just say, discussed his early family life on Poor Farm Estate, but that was the level that student chose to do. Moving on to other digital information created by the project, we have loads of various items from people who were interviewed. This is a book about a company which probably most people in Birmingham haven't heard of, but was also quite well known in its time. And they produced the most bizarre items, as well as cufflinks and metal objects. This is a slumber helmet that women would wear to keep their curls in place. And also, there were pictures in this book of how the company adapted during wartime to different production for weapons and so on. So that's important historical information that has to be given back to the man. We've also got the interviewing. On the right, more digital information, pictures of an exhibition which we produced as part of the Birmingham Heritage Week, and saying what we did. We had interviewees there, we had interviews show, we had some quotes. Some of the quotes are really emotional. People were thanking us for interviewing them, where really we should have been thanking them for telling their stories. Fantastic stories came out. So this is important to keep as evidence of the impact. At the bottom there, you can just see 3 forms which were revised to produce by the Oral History Society about information about the project, agreement to be interviewed, and then copyright agreement, which are really important. So that's digitalised too. Then we collected information from students, and that we felt was really good, because we really felt that we'd contributed to changing their perspective of history and thinking about history itself. What was it? What was it? I love this quote. I studied history at university. The emphasis is always on the larger picture, and we engaged with ordinary individuals and found out their stories, and really learned a lot about the community. Students also wrote tips. These are just a few selections. Students produced a fantastic selection of tips for doing interviews, which we have used. The project has continued. We've got Aston University, which started history relatively recently, and courses are often linked to our sort of content. So we've got Aston involved too, so the interviews have continued after the historic project, England project ended. So there's research that students produce, which is just a small part here to show you. So that gives the background if somebody wanted to find out about the company or that interview or that person. And we also had a tour of Thomas Fattorini, which is still existing. It goes back to the Napoleonic Wars, historic Birmingham company. And that was fantastic. And in the jewellery quarter, so the buildings are, and the equipment ranges from old to modern technology, very modern technology. A map was produced showing the workplace locations of the different interviewees, and that's available online, as well as paper copies have been taken to various festivals and fairs. We did a stall at the Chainmakers Festival, for instance. We've also had it at Birmingham Heritage Week events since. the interviews, part of the bid, the grant was for school children to use the interviews and research in artwork and work with professional artists. So these are two schools. This is Basketball School, which is a school for students with autism, and this is their wall hangings, which are huge. And this is important to keep digitally because the originals have gone back to the school. Obviously, they've got them on display in their reception. And artists in schools work with us doing that work. And this is another professional artist who did a workshop in the archive itself about canals and urban industries. Okay, so we also collected feedback from students and staff which showed the impact of the project on their work. The art teachers felt it was very useful in terms of working with artists, learning different techniques, but also there's another school in Belfield School in King's Norton, which was very important. It was the junior school children who did that artwork, and as shown in the previous slide about the car industry. I had interviews from people in the car industry. Now, the car industry, if you looked at Birmingham and you looked at that area, it's disappeared. You wouldn't know. And they found out that their grandparents and uncles and aunts worked in that industry. So that's very useful for them. We had a community visit to Wallington Park, which is an industrial museum and stately home. So we're trying to involve a diverse selection of the community in archives, not your typical archive visitor. Although we do have researchers, quite a number of researchers come in, because a lot of our materials are unique and not used in research previously. So finally, topic 4 refers to understanding in the sense of recording information, which is useful and is essential. We're probably not doing that, we're just grasping at doing that at the moment. But how it's recorded is crucial. The word understand to me suggests more interpretation and creative thinking. This obviously can't happen without high quality recording systems as a foundation. Looking at how a digital assets register could help us understand community archives and their digital material. Obvious point, if you interview users, wouldn't need to listen to 1.5 hours of an interview to find information. Standardisation and guidance, use of keywords is crucial for consistency across the country, and that's been mentioned before. It's important to be aware of obsolescence in IT. Nephew mentioned that he studied IT at university, and he said, well, medieval records would probably last longer than some of the IT records. And underlying this is the need to promote best use of the wide range of materials with which we've been entrusted. Thank you.